We're on page Yud Beis Amud Aleph, which is 23. Avol tshuva shaloi mi'avazu. It's 9 lines from the bottom of page Yud Beis Amud Aleph. 9 lines from the bottom of page 23. 23. 9 lines from the bottom of page 23. Beginning of the line, Avol. 23. Okay, so let me tell you what's going on, okay? The Alter Rebbe started talking about Avedis. Less than Avedis, it's called Taivas Heter, Taivas Mutter, permitted temptation, desire, lust. And Taivas Heter is called Mutter. Mutter means it's untied. Untied means you can fix it. You indulge in the world in a permitted way, not the best thing in the world, but it's kosher. So you can very quickly reverse it. But an Aved is called Isser. Isser means it's tied down. Tied down means once you do it, you're stuck. So the Alter Rebbe said that there's 2 possibilities. 2 things that can correct Isser. The first, Ki Yova Yoimam. Vesach Yebula, Lasad Lava, Yebula Amal Vesla Netzach. When Mashiach comes, Hashem is going to remove Klipa from the world, like it says, Vesruach Atuma Abba Min Haaretz. And then our association with Shalosh Chubas Me'ezagami is torn. It's no more. But then Alter Rebbe said a second thing. Oh, Yatiyasa Tshuva, that Mi'ava Rabba Gedela Kol Kach, until Zdeinis Nasalek is Ochis. Okay? There's another possibility. That a person does the kind of Tshuva that makes the Aveda into a mitzvah. If a person does the kind of Tshuva that makes the Aveda into a mitzvah, it's obviously not an Aveda anymore, right? You make an Aveda into a mitzvah, it's not an Aveda anymore. What kind of tshuva makes the Aveda into a mitzvah? And the answer is the kind of tshuva which was motivated by the Aveda itself. Sometimes the person is stuck. And they hate themselves because they're stuck. And they hate themselves enough to do something about it. So they only acted because of the stuckness. They only acted because of the sense of being imprisoned. So when a person does tshuva, because the hold the Aveda has on him, and he tears himself away from the Aveda, since the Aveda brought him to the tshuva, so the Aveda is not only removed, the Aveda is transformed to what's called a zuchus. Zdeinis nasalei kizachiyes. The Aveda becomes a mitzvah. And this is, we had 2 Sundays. In the first Sunday, we learned the first idea, how the Asad Love is going to be erased. And on the second Sunday, we learned the second idea, how the Asad Love, that a person does tshuva, and we do the highest madrega of tshuva, that it becomes a mitzvah. And of course, if it sounds good, you know I didn't make it up. If it doesn't sound good, mistam, it's mine. If it sounds richtig, the Beis Masse kommt von a richtigen Mocker. It says in Kitzvei Arizal, there were 2 people. One was a big tzaddik, and at the end of his life, Rahman al-Tzan fell. The other was a big Rosha, and at the end of his life, he had a Mirindik Aliyah. Who were these 2 personalities? The first was Yechanan Ken Gadol. You heard Yechanan Ken Gadol? The Chazal say about Yechanan Ken Gadol, Shimish Pei Shona V'Nasa Tzduki. He served the Eibishter for 80 years and he became a Tzduki. He became Rahman Latana an Apokadis. There's a Yid, his name is Matas Kanter. Rabbi Matas Kanter, now he lives in Crown Heights. He used to live in Australia. Matas Kanter made a timeline in English of the history of the world. And in the back of the book he has appendixes, Pesofis. And one of the appendixes, who was Yechanan Ken Gadol? Because we're not sure who Yechanan Ken Gadol is. You know that there's opinions that say that this Yechanan Ken Gadol is Nasadzuki, is Bimei Matisyahu ben Yechanan Ken Gadol Chashminoi. You know, there's some people who say that the Yechanan Ken Gadol who became an Apokadis, it was the father of the Maccabees. Pashut. We don't know who Yechanan Ken Gadol is. We don't know where Yechanan Gadol lived. We just know 2 things about him. He lived in time of the second Beis Hamikdash, and he was a Ken Gadol for 80 years. At the time that the average life expectancy of a Ken Gadol was 1 year, he was Shmenim Shana Peishon. So it says that he was a big tzaddik, And then he fell. Then the other side was a man by the name of Rebbe Loza ben Dordaya. He was mentioned not long ago in Tanya, in Perek Mem Gil at the end. Rebbe Loza ben Dordaya. Loza ben Dordaya was a big Rosh. The Gemara says he never missed a chance to do an Aveda. It's a Gemara in Aveda Zarah. At the end of his life, he heard a voice, and he was Meseder, and he did Tshuva. When you read the story in the Gemara, it really tickles you. Because when he decided to do Tshuva, he went to find help. He asked for Ezer, he asked for help. And nobody would help him. Anybody he came to him, in the way he described in the Gemara, he went to heaven, he went to the earth, he went to Koiches Al Yoinim. And they all told him, if we're going to do Tshuva, we're going to do Tshuva for ourselves. And he discovered that Tshuva is a lonely affair. So the Gemara says he went through this. He had a lot of chaverim, you understand? But when it came to doing tshuva, he discovered that he's all by his lonesome. And he did tshuva, and he pasha died from his tshuva. The Rabbi says in Tanya, that his tshuva was a tshuva me'ahava before tshuva me'yira. The Rabbi says in the end of Perek Mem Gimel, we keep us from a couple of days ago, that normally the avodah of a yid is first yira, then ahava. There are rare people who they have first ahava, then yira. Kemay Rabbi Loza ben Dordaya. The Rebbe says, Loza ben Dordaya was a big Rosh. When he started his relationship with the Eibishter, his relationship with the Eibishter, he didn't start it with Yireh, fear of an Aveda, fear of Oynesh, fear of the Eibishter, fear of Elokim, fear of Avaya. He had Ahava first. Anyways, he passed away. And the Gemara says, Bocha, Rebbe B'Omer, Yesh Misha Kenya Lo B'Shah Achas Labeinu HaKadosh cried, it's possible for a person to acquire Ilam Haba in 1 hour. Yesh Misha Kenya Lo B'Shah Achas. Somebody acquired Ilam Haba. And of course, there's so many different interpretations for why Rebbe cried. Some people say that Rebbe cried because of Simcha. That even the biggest Rasha can do tshuva. And others say Rebbe cried how unfair it is. A Yid says his whole life. 5 minutes before he dies, he had to particularly say to this, and Yesh L'Chelik Elam Haba. So it says in Arizal that when this Rabbi Loza ben Dordaya passed away, he came to Maila and he had no mitzvahs, no levushim. So they gave him the mitzvahs of Yechanan Ken Gadol. Yechanan Ken Gadol was a tzaddik his whole life. He became a Rosh at the last moment. Rabbi Loza ben Dordaya was a Rosh his whole life. He did tshuva his last moment. So they gave Rabbi Loza ben Dordaya the mitzvahs of Yechanan Ken Gadol. So the Welt fragt a Poshet Kasher. The Gemara says, and certainly Kabbalah and Mussar and Chassidus brings, that when a person does tshuva me'ava, the Avedas become mitzvahs. This Deinis nasa lei kezochis. Yeah? When a person does tshuva for Avedas, and his Avedas become mitzvahs, those mitzvahs are bigger than regular mitzvahs, because they're the transformation of Klippa. So it says, the Shaila is, why does Rabbi Loza ben Dordaya need somebody else's mitzvahs? Every Aveda he ever committed turned around and became a mitzvah. Those mitzvahs are even higher than the mitzvahs of an ordinary person. So what is the Yechanan Ken Gadol's mitzvahs? You understand the question? Yeah? If a person does tshuva, the Avedas become mitzvahs, and those Avedas that have become mitzvahs are greater than Stamazoi mitzvahs. So why does Rabbi Loza ben Dordaya need to have the mitzvahs of Yechanan Ken Gadol? And there's a simple answer to the question. Answer to this question is Rabbi. Every single inyan that we do has an oyer and a keli, has a goof and a neshama, has a light and a vessel. And in Lashon Kabbalah, it's called a levush, a garment. A levush, a beged, a garment. Why do you have to have levushim? The levushim bring the oyer to you. Right? Just like people who exercise, yeah? I mean, you don't see it anymore. There was a whole kufa that people used to go around with outfits made of silver or gold. The purpose was they wanted to maximize the sunlight. They wanted to bring the sunlight to themselves. So they wore clothing that would conduct the warmth, keep them warm in cold climates, or whatever the details were. People wear certain clothes to bring light to themselves. What they say is more basically, we have light on this earth because we have an atmosphere. Right? Again, I've been through this 100 times with you, yeah? I was a little boy, we went camping, also at Teirenikis. I had a flashlight. It's very, very dark. The only time you see darkness is when you go camping and you maybe see a few stars if it's like that, right? You put on a flashlight and you have a beam of light. A beam of light. There's a problem. The beam of light is dirty. It's full of these teeny little pieces. And you're laying on your back, looking up at this beam of light, and you're imagining what would happen if you can get a vacuum cleaner to take out all those pieces of schmutz that you have a clear beam of light. And of course the answer is, if you didn't have those little tiny pieces, there would be no light. Because you're not seeing the light from the flashlight. You're seeing the light from the flashlight hit those little tiny pieces and change the energy into visible light. If you didn't have those little particles, it would be invisible. The light would go and go and go and go, and you wouldn't see it. This is called a lavush. It's called a conductor. This world, us, all of us, live in an ocean of, it's called an atmosphere. It's about 100 miles of pieces. And if it's dark enough and have a good flashlight, you can see those pieces. If you would remove that atmosphere, so during the day it would be 150 degrees hot, and 5 minutes after the sun set, 5 minutes after the sun set, it would be below freezing. Go to the moon, you'll see as Adam and Tzias. During the day, the moon is unbelievably hot, and during the night, the moon is unbelievably cold, and it changes almost over in a minute. The sun disappears. Why? Because on the moon there's no atmosphere. So the heat, the light only becomes light when it hits the planet. Yeah, we have an atmosphere. The atmosphere keeps the heat in. So when the sun goes down, the atmosphere is still warm. So it doesn't get so cold so fast. You understand that before the atmosphere can get cold enough, the sun rises the next morning and it warms up the atmosphere. In other words, we walk through light because there's something conducting the light. It's called an atmosphere. Okay? It's called a lavush, a kli, a malbush. This is a mashal. And the nimshal is an neshama in Gan Eden. A neshama in Gan Eden was on this earth. I did mitzvahs, learned Torah. Before the neshama ever came to this world, he was a gewaldige Baal Seichel. A neshama is a Baal Seichel, a smart guy. And he understood all kinds of wonderful abstractions about the Eibishter. But that's all it was an understanding of Elokus. He comes down into this world, and he learns Torah and does mitzvahs. So when he goes back to the same place he came from, goes to a different place. Those are details. When the neshama returns Lamaila, it brings with him the elokus of the mitzvah that he performed, which results in this: that after the neshama was on this earth, and it goes back, Lamaila doesn't only understand elokus; it actually experiences elokus itself. This is called tainug. Neshamas in Gan Eden before they were here are balisech, they're smart. When they come back after being here, they have what's called tainug asaga. They understand. They experience the pleasure of elokus. But you have to be able to conduct it. You have to be able to hold it. And what holds it are the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs are their garments, and they hold your oil. So imagine a neshama comes to Gan Eden, and it has the tainug elokid, it has the delight of godliness from thousands of mitzvahs, but it has no clothes. It has no levushim. So you're sitting Gan Eden, all around you is Eida Laki, and you're sitting in the darkness. Not because the light isn't there, but because there's nothing to conduct. There's nothing to translate the light into a form that the neshama is able to experience. So this is how it's explained. When a Baal Tshuva does Tshuva, all the Avedas become mitzvahs, and it reveals an enormous amount of Oyer, but you still need mitzvahs bepashtus. You still need the behavior performance of mitzvahs, because those mitzvahs are the garments that conduct the oil, the tainug elokid associated with the tshuva and with the Torah mitzvahs and so on. So Moshe Ben was a big tzaddik. When he passed away, he was about tshuva. The Chazal say about tshuva is higher than a tzaddik. And the Chazal mean it when they say it, yeah? So he would come to Gan Eden, there'd be a lot of oil, he'd be sitting in the dark because he has no mitzvahs to conduct it. So they gave him the mitzvahs, Yechanei Kein Gadol. That's the pshat. You understand? So this vart that we just had last time, which was before Pesach, when a person does tshuva miyavad, Avedas become mitzvahs, you still need mitzvahs. Avedas becoming mitzvahs is a higher inyan, but a tzaruchni is the inyan. You still need mitzvahs to hold on to this oil. Go ahead, you avol. You see avol? How many lines in the band did I tell you? 9. But we're talking about Rachmana Litzlan Avedas. We're talking about Rachmana Litzlan Avedas. Avedas are not good. And of course, an Aveda is not good for I don't hear you. Avedis, Avedot. We're talking about Avedis. And what are we saying about an Aveda? An Aveda is kosher v'asa b'dei right? It's stuck. How do you unstick it? We're doing a very high madrega of tshuva. Yeah? tshuva shalem yavazu. The person does tshuva, but he's not doing tshuva on this madrega of ahava. Says the Rabbi Afshi tshuva nechoina. It's a proper tshuva. V'Hashem yislach le, the Eibishter will forgive him. And of course, the way you would say it in technical language, in Musa languages, he won't be punished in the Elam Haba. But the Aveda remains an Aveda, doesn't become a schus. It's not raised out of klipa altogether. Adei kates till the end of time, like it says in the pasuk. If a person did an Aveda and he did tshuva, the Eibishter forgives him. Now there's different madregas in tshuva also, yeah. But there's a madrega of tshuva, the lashon that Chazal is denis naslekish gogas, and Aveda he did on purpose becomes like an Aveda he did by mistake, and there's no einish. Right? The lashon that's brought in Tanya from the Gemara is ein maskidin leidov v'lechatadav v'yevedin. A person is judged for Avedas which he did tshuva. They don't mention. There's no einish. You're not punished. But there's a very big difference between not being punished for an Aveda and the Aveda being wiped away, the Aveda being transformed. In order for the Aveda to be transformed, you have to have tshuva miyavad. Yeah. So who cares? Who cares? You did an Aveda, you don't want to be punished, so you did tshuva. No, so you're not going to be punished. You're not going to be punished. So who cares if Aveda's around or not around? You're not going to be punished. In other words, if the purpose for tshuva is not to receive einish, the purpose for tshuva is to receive a punishment, and a person does tshuva, there's not going to be any einish. So what difference does it make to that person whether the Aveda is completely transformed or the Aveda is not treated? What's the pshat, right? So of course, this is an idea which comes up a lot in our learning. The problem with the Aveda is not just that you're going to be punished. The problem with the Aveda is that it takes something away from a person. Every Aveda takes something away from a person. And every tshuva gives something back to the person. But the idea that an Aveda takes something from a person, and when you do tshuva, it's not only that you're not punished, but the tshuva gives back to the person what the person lost. This requires a higher madrega of tshuva. Okay, we're going to continue to read, unless somebody wants to say anything. And in Mitzvah Hashem, these ideas are going to come up again. You'll see later in Tanya, in Perek Yud Zayin, and in Perek Chavov, these ideas are going to come up again, and then over there we'll talk about it more about Ichas. Here I just mentioned it b'kitzur. Okay, now, kum t'chayis to say, there's dvarim mutarim, there's dvarim asurim. There's permitted things and there's prohibited things, yeah? A permitted taiva, even if you did it, you can fix it. An isur, a prohibited thing, is a problem. Why? Because unless you do tshuva miyava rabba, it sticks around, it lingers. You're not going to be punished, but it lingers, it remains. And because it remains, you have a shaykhas to klipa. But that's the word. The person does tshuva, it's not being punished. But if he didn't do tshuva miyava rabba, so even though he's not being punished for the aveda, he has a shaykhas to the aveda. Yeah. So Alter Rebbe adds another detail. Okay. Now, for better or for worse, that's my job. I'm a teacher, and as a teacher, I have to figure out how I should teach. The first question is what I should teach. The second question is how I should teach. And then the third question is teaching actually. So I'm going to say something now as akdama to what follows. I admittedly, I'm telling you a piece of it. I'm not telling you the ganze Meise. I'm not telling you the whole story. I'm telling you a piece of it. And there's a part of me that feels very bad about that because you don't want to make Avedas into Ruchnias. Aveda is an Aveda, you know. An Aveda is a bad thing. A person has to do an Aveda, you got to fix it. But Mepnei Sibes Shoynes, I'm going to be presenting what's going to follow, really for the rest of this payday, in a more Ruchnias dika light. Mepnei Sibes, and I'm saying again, I'm not telling you the ganze Meise. I'm telling you a part of the Meise. The reason it's important for me to say this is because you can't trivialize Avedas. You know, we live in an age where, unfortunately, most of us are in the Madrega Bal Tshuva, Lemis. And it doesn't feel good to feel bad about the things in our life which are not good. But an Aveda is an Aveda. You know, in other words, the past, don't worry about. But for tomorrow and for 5 minutes from now, you can't say there's a psychological explanation, there's a philosophy. An Aveda is an Aveda. Or an Aveda, Torah Nishtar. It doesn't matter, you know what I'm saying? So again, even though I'm going to be teaching this to you in a more ruchniistic way, but it's only a part of it. Okay, this is what I want to tell you. You have in Tanya, and he gets tshuva, an interesting idea. And the idea is that every Aveda is two Avedas. Every Aveda is two Avedas. And it actually makes a lot of sense. Every Aveda is two Avedas. What does an Aveda mean? An Aveda means I did something wrong. An Aveda means I did something that I shouldn't have done. An Aveda really means I did something that I don't want to do. Right? Nobody wants to do an Aveda. Yeah? No. So if you don't want to do an Aveda, why do you do it? What's the tenets? Simple. Yetzer hara. Yetzer hara is nicht hagelechter. Yetzer hara is a simple. It's not a joke. And of course, when it comes to Yetzer hara, you don't analyze. You don't do philosophy. You have to tell them no. Yeah. So the Alter Rebbe, Yigeres HaTshuva, says that every Aveda is two Avedas. Why? Because for a person to do an Aveda, they have to forget about the Eibishter first. If you're focused, if you're thinking about the Eibishter, if a person is busy thinking about the Eibishter, falt man nicht. If a person is thinking about Hashem, a person is busy thinking about Elokus, a person is busy, he's involved with the Eibishter on a higher and deeper level, so you're busy. If a person does something wrong, the beginning of that wrong is what you would call a hes chadas, yeah? You have a job, yeah? Whatever your job is, you're putting screws into wheels on an assembly line in Detroit. Whatever your job is, and you made a mistake. Why did you make a mistake? Because you weren't paying attention. No? Not paying attention is not no one's going to punish you for not paying attention. But you're going to be punished because of the mistake you made based on the fact that you stopped paying attention. So that means every time we do something inappropriate or we fail to do something that we must, there's two components. The Eretz Shazach is we stop paying attention. And because we're not paying attention, so we ended up in a place where we shouldn't have been. In Kabbalah, this is called the Yud K and Vav K. Yud K is the paying attention. The Vav K is the doing what the Eibishter said and what the Eibishter said not to do. So the Rebbe says in Tanya, you will never fall in Vav K unless you tune out in Yud K. That's why it says in the Zayah that every Aveda has two tshuvas. Tshuva, it says in Zayah, is Tashav Hey. But there's two Heys. Tashav Hey Tata, Tshuva Tata. Tashav Hey Yelah, Tshuva Yelah. Right, what does that mean? The first Hey is you have to put back the lower Hey where it belongs. The second Tshuva is put the higher Hey. What does that mean? When a person is doing Tshuva, you have to do Tshuva for the thing that I did that's incorrect. And you have to Tshuva for the fact that you stopped paying attention. The lack of attentiveness is the mucker of the Aveda, yeah? That's how it works. So every Aveda is two Avedas. That's how it's going to work out. Every Aveda is two Avedas, yeah? To say this backwards, to say this the other way, yeah? An Aveda happens in this world. Aveda happens here, in this world. Stopping to pay attention is an inyan ruchni. Right? I mean, like I said to you before, you're working on an assembly line, and you're distracted, you don't pay attention, so you make a mistake. No one's punishing you for being distracted, you're being punished for the mistake. But the mistake happened because you stopped paying attention. So, an Aveda, which is an Einish, is something that we did wrong. The Aveda of not paying attention is an Inyan Ruchni. So the Alter Rebbe says something now, what you say now is as follows. Some Avedas are Be'ike Ruchnis, the Avedas. Most Avedas are physical things they're not allowed to do. Some Avedas are Ruchnis, the Avedas. In other words, some Avedas are not defined by what I did wrong. Some Avedas are defined by the fact that I stopped thinking about Hashem. In other words, going back to the example, you have a job, and you're supposed to do something, and you didn't do it correctly. Why didn't you do it correctly? Because you weren't paying attention. So there is the not paying attention part, and there's the wrong action. No one's going to punish you for not paying attention. How do you know what's going on in your head? You're punished for doing the wrong action based on the fact you didn't pay attention. Some Avedas, Ikram, are primarily the first thing. Most Avedas are measured in what I did wrong. Some Avedas are not about what I did wrong. Some Avedas, I stopped paying attention. So the Alter Rebbe is going to say that for those Avedas, if the Ikir of the Aveda is not what I did wrong, the Ikir of the Aveda is that I stopped paying attention, the Alter Rebbe is going to say for those things it's easier to do tshuva. You understood what I said or you didn't understand what I'm saying? The punchline is this. Every time we do something wrong, there's two things. A, we stop paying attention. B, you made a mistake. In Avedis, and no one's going to punish you for not paying attention. No one holds it against you. Your mind wandered. The oynish is for the mistake I made. Or to say it in other words, who punishes us for our Avedis? To Yasrecha or Asecha. Who punishes a person? Who punishes me for my Avedis? The Avedis themselves. I mean, that's what Sheikh right? Person does something wrong, but someone's giving you malchus. An Aveda is not good because it hurts us. So there's no. The oynish is from the Meiser Aveda. The punishment is from what you did wrong, not from the fact that you were distracted. But what if the whole Aveda is a distraction? Or what if the Ikir of the Aveda? You understand what I'm saying? Most Avedas, what I did wrong was I put the screw in wrong. I did something I shouldn't have done. The fact that before that my mind wandered is very, very serious. It's very, very important. But there's no punishments for that. In other words, the tshuva is not necessary for that. So the Rebbe is going to say, some Avedas alechatchile, ruchni is the Avedas. Some Avedas are primarily to stop paying attention. And the Rebbe is going to argue for those Avedas, it's easier to do tshuva. That's the word. It's easier to do tshuva. This is the word. It's easier to do tshuva. Normally, you did an Aveda, what else did Rebbe say? Two choices. Wait for Mashiach to come, or tshuva b'yavar Rabbi. But if an Aveda is measured primarily by Ruchnius, then it's easier to do tshuva. Okay, that's what the Alter Rebbe is going to say. Now let's read it inside. If a person does this Aveda, it's an Aveda like any other Aveda, and it goes into the category of Isur. What Alter Rebbe says as follows: it is corrected through Tshuva Nechoina. Tshuva Nechoina means complete Tshuva, but not Tshuva Me'ahav. In other words, you don't have to do Tshuva with Mesiras Nefesh to fix this. You have to just do Tshuva Nechoina, ubekavana atzuma, and very strong kavana. Bekriyas Shmash Alamita, one says Krishma. Keneida Me'arizim, it says in Kabbalah, but when you say Krishma Alamita, you have to do Tshuva. And the way it works is this. If a person did an Aveda Mamesh, has to Tshuva Me'ahava to reverse it. But which kind of an Aveda requires Tshuva Me'ahava to reverse it? An Aveda which happens in this world. But an Aveda which is measured primarily by Ruchnius, a lesser Tshuva is sufficient. Umurum is Gemara, it's hinted in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Kol HaKeirei Kriya Shema B'Toseh, when a person says Shema properly, Ki'ilu Eiches Cherev Shal Shtei Piyes V'Chulu, it's as if he's holding a two-edged sword, Lahare Gufei Zachitzeinim, to kill the bodies of Klippa, Shenasu Levush, turn to page 24, now you're based on Beis, it became a garment, Lechayes Shebetipa, the life which is in the Tipos, Ve'ela Chayes Mehem, the life ascends, Kidul Yedechem, like it's written in Sifrei Kabbalah. And again, I'm not telling you the Ganze Parasha. They have so many sikhs on this, but this is part of it. Some Avedas are Chachil Ruchni is the Avedas. Most Avedas, again, like I said to you before, no one punishes you when you're working in a job for not paying attention. They punish you for the mistake. Some minyanim, the Aveda is primarily the not paying attention. In other words, in the Lashon from Zayar, some Avedas are in Yudkid, not above Kid. Rebbe says in Tanya, again, it's not Tshuva. Some Avedas are connected to Tshuva Law. Why they're connected to Tshuva Law? Because Tshuva Law is about my connection to Hashem. Tshuva Tatah is about my Aveda. Tshuva Law is about my... Some Avedas, Chatchila, are Ruchni is the Avedas, and the Rebbe says they're easier to fix. You know why they're easier to fix? Because they don't happen here. Avedas that happen in the physical world. You have to take it out of the physical world. That's a job. Avedas that happen in the mind of a person, Avedas that happen in Ruchnius, if they didn't come into the physical world, they're easier to correct because they're not as real. For this reason, this is not mentioned in the Torah as an Aveda. Even though in a way this Aveda is even worse. The Gadol Aveda in certain aspects, it's considered a bigger Aveda and adds more Tumah V'Aklipis Shamelin. Or Marbe B'Meid Me'ed V'Etzoyz V'Levatol Yisabiyas Asuris. But the Alter Rebbe says the difference is that Shababiyas Asuris, by most Avedas, you create something in this world. You add energy and life in Klipa that happens down here, and therefore there's no way to raise up the life from that Aveda, even if you do tshuva, unless yasa tshuva b'yavarava, you do the highest madrega of tshuva, which is kol kach, which is such an extent, the Aveda becomes a mitzvah, and therefore in most Avedas we did an Aveda. So again, if you do tshuva, you're not punished. If you do tshuva, you're not punished. But the idea that you should do tshuva and that the Aveda never happened, for this you have to have tshuva miyavarava. But Medvarim Amudim, you're talking about Avedas that happen in the physical world. Avedas that are divine primarily. By Ruchnius, because they never came down in the physical world, they're much easier to correct. You understand? That's what the Alter Rebbe is explaining. And like I said to you before, a person made a mistake. Why did they make a mistake? Because they stopped concentrating. The concentration is an inyan Ruchni. The Aveda is an inyan Gashmi. That's forever. But if the Aveda is a Chatchila, an Aveda of concentration, if the Aveda is Chatchila, you concentration, so then it's corrected more quickly because it's not as much in the world. This is what the Alter Rebbe is trying to communicate to us. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. I'm going to explain it a little bit, but this is the next particular, the last few lines. I'm going to leave Mitzvah Hashem for next week. I talk about it just a little bit. Okay, let's fabreg about it a little bit. I'll try to do this quick, but I can't promise it's going to be quick, okay? Yiddishkeit defines everything by a ma'aseh. Yiddishkeit defines everything by an action, by a ma'aseh, right? Yiddishkeit is about actions. Everything in Yiddishkeit has to do with behavior, with action, ritual, yeah? Ad kedei kach, that the social scientists who think they look at the world objectively call us lahadul elf aviadolos. It's a religion of ritual, right? Judaism is not about faith, it's about ritual, which is the biggest lie in the universe. Judaism is all about faith. But Judaism believes that the permanence and the reality of the faith is the anchor of the Maaseh HaMitzvah, of doing the mitzvah. Yeah? I'll give you an example from Chitas, from the other day. Mamish 2 days ago we had a Chitas. We're learning Perek Mamdalet, 44, which is a very unusual Perek. When you read chapter 44 in Tanya, Perek Mamdalet, Alter Rebbe introduces you to two parts of Yiddishkeit, two components in Yiddishkeit. And it's mentioned also in Agdama and in other places. And they're called Hanistarot v'Haniglos. Hanistarot v'Haniglot. Hanistarot v'Haniglos. How do you say Hanistarot? The translation of Hanistarot means the secret. Haniglos means the revealed. Okay? But how do you say it in American? In America, speak American. Hanistarot means personal religion. Haniglos, forgive me for saying a bad word, Nashul, means organized religion. You ever heard that? It's not. I mean, if you speak to the kids, this is the worst words in America. Organized religion. The opposite of organized religion is chaotic religion, is disorganized. Yeah. But the personal religion. What's personal religion? Personal religion means I have a relationship with God based on me. Anybody who has a relationship with God based on themselves, no, they're God. It's not so complicated. The Rebbe spoke about this. He spoke about the Nazis. They also believed in God, of their own creation. So they decided that God wanted that they should do kach v'kach v'kach. You understand? But that's two ideas. Hanistares means my relationship with the Eibishter as an individual human being, my brain and my heart. Haniglos means we have the same Shabbos, the same kosher, the same matzah, the same lulav, the same esrig, the same tzilas ha'emed, the same cheesecake on Shavuos. Okay, maybe there's different recipes, but salsains, yeah? With the same mitzvahs. And in the Elam Hazeh, in the Farplante to Elam Hazeh, in which we live, they've created this notion that if you do the same as everybody else, then you lose your freedom. We call it organized, because organized religion. Everybody eats matzah on Pesach. I want to eat matzah, Chveisvos, Tisha B'Av. Pesach, I'm gonna sit in the souk. Why? That's how I feel. Right? In America, that's how I feel. Don't tell me I'm not allowed to feel. Yeah. But Yiddishkeit, unfortunately, didn't divide, it didn't capitulate. Right? America, Shalom Aleichem America, we've been here for 3,000 years. We've met America times 100, and we've survived them all, and we'll survive this Mishagas also. Yeah, but the current Mishagas is religion is the one which is personal. When personal, I decided for myself. Personal religion is non-religion. Personal religion is self-worship. Personal religion is self-worship for a very, very simple reason. I don't have a higher power. I don't have an I talked to you about this many, many times. When the Rebbe spoke about the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Neach, yeah? When the Rebbe talked about the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Neach, the Rebbe didn't say that Goyim Shkishav Mitzvah Neach, they should have a meaningful life. He didn't say that. When the Rebbe spoke about the Sheva Mitzvah, he didn't say Goyim Shkishav Mitzvah Neach so that they should have a good life or make them feel good. The Rebbe said that Goyim have to Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Neach because there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears and everything they do is recorded in a book. Yeah, everyone's waiting for me to talk about Goldstein. I mean, it's the story is tragic. The Kiddush Hashem is unbelievable. The Kiddush Hashem, they spoke about the moment of silence in the White House. Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Neach. Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Neach, when the Rebbe spoke about it, the focus that the Rebbe gave was Yira, not Abba. The Rebbe didn't say keep Sheva Mitzvahs because it feels good. The Rebbe said keep Sheva Mitzvahs because you're going to give a cheshbon. You're going to meet your maker, and you're not going to have your drinking buddies around. It's going to be you and him, and you're going to have no clothes. It's going to be raw. He's going to see exactly what you are. And if it's not good, you're not going to be able to hide. It's not going to be comfortable. Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Neach, the Rebbe said the yesod of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Neach is Yideh. I have to give them Eibishten a cheshbon. I have to give them Eibishten a cheshbon. That was the word. And that's not so comfortable. It's not so comfortable. Why? Because no one's asking me how I feel. No one's asking what mood I'm in. No one's asking me if I agree. But that's Yiddishkeit. Hashem gave us mitzvahs. Hashem gave us mitzvahs. And the mitzvahs you have to keep. Shabbos is the 7th day of the week, not when you're in the mood. Yom Kippur is Achas Bashana, not when you're in the mood. Pesach has 8 days, it happens from this day to this day, not when you're in the mood. And Pesach Talmud has Chametz, the Pesach Matzah. That's how Yiddishkeit works. So they call it ritual. They call it organized religion. You're forced. But what is the real issue? The real issue is Batel Ritzein Chom Lifnei Ritzein Nei. That's what the real issue is. Every time, the Rebbe says in Tanya, Perek Ben Malav, chapter 41, I tell you all the time, any Jew does any mitzvah is considered Mesidas Nefesh. Why? You could have done something else. Yeah, you ate Chazayis Matzah, yeah, and you were in a bad mood. And you didn't want to go. Well, your parents forced you to come to the Seder. You came to the Seder, you ran out of the house. But you ate a Chazayis Matzah. It's called Mesidas Nefesh. What's the Mesidas Nefesh? I did what I was told and not what I wanted. That's all. That's why everything in Yiddishkeit comes down to mitzvahs ma'asos. You have to do what the Eibishter said. No one cares how you feel. I don't want to be sarcastic and insensitive, but feelings don't define people. Work defines people. Self-control defines people. And the more we do what someone else, in this case the Eibishter, tells us to do, and the less we do what we want to do, the more we're a mensch. And the more we say, I'm only going to do what I feel like and what I want, the less we're a mensch. So Yiddishkeit is divided up into 2 parts. The deeper part of Yiddishkeit is, quote, my personal relationship with the Eibishter. My personal relationship with the Eibishter is very individual. My mind and my heart understand the Eibishter this way and feel the Eibishter in this way. The other person's mind, the other person's heart understand the Eibishter and feel the Eibishter the other way. Now, that's called spirituality. That's called intelligence. That's called depth. That's called soul. Yeah? But when you have an Aveda there, you can fix it. The place where an Aveda has roots and to correct it is much, much more difficult is when we did something wrong. Or we missed an opportunity to do something right. Why? It's only an action. Because in that action there is the property of bittul. In that action, there's the idea of doing what the Eibishter wants without asking me how I feel. So, if you think about it, yeah, we're Americans. Yeah? Most of us are Americans. Some of us are Americans. I don't know. We've lived in America for a few days. Yeah, Paltiel. Yeah? America is all how I feel. And Yiddishkeit is not how I feel. Yiddishkeit is was hat der Eibishter geheißen. What did the Eibishter say? So the Alter Rebbe says, when a person does an Aveda, that the Ikir of that Aveda is in the Madrege of how I feel, you can fix it. Why? Because it's not connected to the world. When a person does an Aveda, which is not connected to how I feel, but is connected to what I do, that's much harder to fix. Why? Because that's in the world. In other words, it's all the opposite. It's exact. Whatever America is, Yiddishkeit is 180 degrees. Punkt verkehrt. What you do matters much more than how you feel. What you do matters much more how you feel. And if you made a mistake in your feeling, not a big deal. Tomorrow you'll feel different. But a meise kemenit farich, an action or an inaction in the behavioral world is much more important. And that's how Yiddishkeit is anchored. That's how the Eibishter built Yiddishkeit. That meise bepoil is the most important thing. Avedas and machshava are terrible. You read the Sifrei Musa about the Chet Hegel, Chet b'machshava, Chet b'meise. We're not trying to say that it's not a big deal. But the way the Eibishter created Teira and Mitzvah is like this. You didn't have it in your brain, you can fix it. Because it's not here. You didn't have it in your actions, it's much more difficult to fix. And that's, like I said to you before, this is a partial interpretation of what we just read. I read you a bunch of lines, and we learned it together, and there's much more to this, whatever it is, 10 or 15 lines. I don't know how much we learned. There's much more to it, but this is how I am teaching it to you. This is, I'm going to say it one more time. There's three things, okay? There's Dvarim HaMutarim, things that are not unavailable. Dvarim HaMutarim, permitted things, you have to manage. They're called heter. Heter means they're not tied down. A person indulges in worldly things. A person indulges in worldly things, it's not an Aveda, but it has a cost, huh? The Rebbe spoke many times about Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch. You know what Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch was? He was the greatest of the Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It says in the Mishnah, it's Pirkei Avos that we're going to read this Shabbos, Rabbi Yochanan Chamisha Talmidim hoyu lo Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Ve'elu hei, Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch, Rabbi Shimon ben Chananya, Rabbi ben Horkenes, Rabbi Shimon ben Asano, and I think Rabbi Yossi came. He had 5 Talmidim. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 Talmidim. And so he said, in Yukol, he has Suwaru Ezemid. Remember, Ezemid Teva, Ezemid Ra. So in the course of the Mishnayos, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, Yukol Chachmi Yisrael B'Chaf Miznei. Ve'Elazar ben Horkenes Afimah. Ve'Elazar ben Aruch B'Kaf Shniya Machriyas Kula. But take all my Talmidim and put them on one side of the scale, together with Rabbi Elazar ben Horkenes. Rabbi Elazar ben Horkenes is Be'er Such Ein Man B'Tipa. But Rabbi Elazar ben Horkenes was a computer of information. Never forgot anything he heard. This is called Sinai, right? It's he forgot other Lashanis. He just had. He never forgot any Mishnah he ever heard. Remember, you're talking about a time that the Mishnah was all oral. So the most important thing was someone who never forgets. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, he put all my Talmidim on one side of the scale, and Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch on the other side of the scale, he's more important than them. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch went on vacation. He went away to Florida, to California, to what's it called? In the desert, what's it called in California? I forgot what it's called. Palm Springs.
His wife wanted.
Huh?
His wife wanted him.
Yeah, that's the Rebbe said exactly those words. So the Chazal say that what did he find over there? This Chamra de Pargusa Maya de Yums. Good wine and mineral water, which was very healing. He went to relax. It was glad kosher. He had not a hechsher from the Bas, had a hechsher from the new land now with 2 Rabbon himself. Kosher shebe kosher. So the Chazal say the Elazar ben Aruch went to this place, and instead of saying Achedesh Hazel Lachem, he said Achedesh Hayol Libam. Yeah, what's the difference in a Dalad and a Reish? What's the difference between a Dalad and a Reish? A Yud. What's the difference between a Chof and a Beis? Also a Yud. So instead of saying HaChodesh, he said HaCheresh. Instead of saying Lochem, he said Libam. He took the Yud from from the Dalet and he put it by the Chaf. HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem means this newness is yours. HaChedesh Hayoliba means your heart is deaf. That's what HaChedesh. Now it was a mistake. You made a mistake? Yeah, you know what it is? You go on vacation. And of course, if you're at El Chayid, you go on vacation, there's a big beautiful shul with a mikveh and a glass of coffee, and a daf hayomi in the morning and at night, and all the good zaken. And does anyone know how to lane? Oh, I can lane. Oh, yeah, mate. So I start laning, and he read it wrong. Okay, so they started screaming at him, excuse me, I don't know where you come from, but it's a chodesh. Yeah. So the Gemara tells this, and the Rebbe says in Chassidus. I sound like I'm being disrespectful, and I don't mean to be chashuv. The point is, a person, a Gadol B'Yisrael, who allowed himself, there were no Avedis. It's Echposhet erlebt, Abrunzach. He allowed himself. So the Gemara says that the effect on his muhus was that instead of Chiddush was Chedish. Instead of Lachem was Liba. The point is, Taivas Heter, permitted things, you have to be careful. If you don't manage them correctly, though, people who enjoy Olam Hazeh, there's no crime enjoying Olam Hazeh, but you lose your edge. A Yid is a servant of Hashem, and indulgence in materialism diminishes it. There's no question, but it's correctable. Why? Because it's Heter. Then there's an Aveda. So again, this is how I am teaching you. There's two Madregas in Aveda. Most Avedas, the Aveda is not what you were thinking, what you were feeling. The Aveda is what you did. To fix what you did, to fix something that happened in my physical behavior. The famous Lashon HaChinuch, we're not what we think and feel, we're what we do. But to say it in psychological language, we are our habits. A human being is much more his habits than his feelings. If I decide today I want to be a big tzaddik, I can't do it because I have bad habits. I did the same action again and again and again and again. I lost my chush. So if a person's Aveda is a behavioral Aveda, it takes an enormous tshuva to reverse, or Mashiach to come. If the Aveda is an Aveda in Ruchnis, so this is the three things. The first thing is Varim Amutarim, Heter. The second thing is Varim Asurim, Isir. And the third thing is an Aveda where the Ikir of the Aveda is here. Not here. Where the Ikir of the Aveda is in Ruchnis, the Rebbe says Tshuva Nechayid is enough. Kish B'Shalomit is enough. If the Aveda does not come down into a bad behavior, if I do what the Eibishter says, no, but then I lost my Yishmak, I can regain it. Much easier. The Tshuva is much easier. But if I allow myself to misbehave, or to not to behave, to correct mistakes in Maaseh, the Rebbe says it's much, much more difficult. Okay, so this is the shit. Mitzvah, next time we're going to start from Ubazeh Yuvan, which is mamish the last few lines of this Pedic. Hamaisa hu ha'ikir is not just because it says in the Mishnah. Hamaisa hu ha'ikir, it's teva b'nei yodam. Human nature is, as long as you do the right thing, even if the kavanah was not the way it should be, you'll come back to doing the way good kavanah. But if Rahman al-Litzan, you stop doing the Maaseh, it's having good kavanah doesn't mean you're going to come back to the Maaseh. It's much, much more difficult to do tshuva. That's what the Alter Rebbe is saying in effect.